It is great to look out and see all of these faces this evening on this auspicious occasion. At this time, I would like to ask our city clerk to confirm that we have a quorum.
Yes, good evening, Mayor. We do have a quorum this evening. In council chambers, we have Councilmember Esteve, Councilmember Rogers, Councilmember Wolfley, Councilmember Brady, Councilmember Truesdale, Councilmember Ndebumalu, and Mayor Adams.
Okay, thank you so very much. At this time, I open it up to the council if there are any agenda additions, deletions, or amendments. Hearing none, we'll move forward to citizen participation.
There is no one signed up this evening, Mayor.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I didn't quite mean it that way, but at this time, we will move forward with our presentation, and I would ask that the council join me as we swear in our new chief of police. Let's go down for the swearing in. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, Chief.
Family members who'd like to join us, please come up. Any family members who'd like to have join you, please do. Raise your right hand, please. I state your name.
I, Dwayne, Preston,
Do swear or affirm
do swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
and that I will be faithful
that I will be faithful
and bear true allegiance
to
to the state of Maryland
the state of Maryland,
and support the Constitution
and support the Constitution
and laws thereof,
and laws thereof,
and that I will,
and that I will,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
diligently and faithfully,
diligently and faithfully,
without partiality or prejudice,
without partiality or prejudice,
execute the office of,
execute the office of Chief of Police,
according to the Constitution
according to the Constitution
and laws of this state.
and laws of this state.
Congratulations. At this time, I would like to have United States Attorney Aisha Gray come forward for a presentation.
So Chief, I have a citation for you from the Office of the State's Attorney. Be it hereby known to all that the Office of the State's Attorney for Prince George's County, Maryland, offers its sincerest congratulations to Chief, I like how that sounds, Dwayne A. Preston, in recognition of being elected as the third Chief of Police for the city of Bowie and the first African American to serve in this role. Whereas Chief Preston is a 30-year veteran of law enforcement, serving as deputy chief before assuming the position as acting chief. And whereas Chief Preston supervised the department's daily operations and internal investigations, served as the primary author of the department's strategic plan, and established the department's the department's body-worn camera program. And whereas Chief Preston also served on the Prince George's County Police Reform Task Force, a role in which his recommendations were implemented to improve the county's police department and policing overall. I appreciate your dedicated work and integrity for the city of Bowie. Now, therefore, I am pleased to confer upon you the state's attorney's citation. Congratulations.
Chief, as will happen often, I would like to put you on the spot for a moment. If you could speak to all those who are gathered here in your honor.
Thank you, Mayor.
There's one right there.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council, Mr. Lott, our City Manager, family, friends, and distinguished guests. I am humbled to have been selected as the third Chief of Police for the City of Bowie. I am thankful to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I thank our City Manager, Mr. Alfred Lott, and the City Council for entrusting me to lead this department. I believe that none of us can achieve anything without structure, support, and encouragement. Those that know me well know that my family is my priority. I appreciate all the support from the host of family and friends that are here this evening. However, a special acknowledgement is reserved for my children, Kayla and Dwayne II. I am extremely proud of both of you. But I want you all to know that I stand here today because I am a blessed man that has benefited from a supportive wife, a best friend who has encouraged, challenged, defended, and walked with me throughout this entire journey. I know that I would not be here today if it wasn't for the strength of our bond that I share with my wife, Vicky. Love you guys. As you look around this evening, there's an impressive group of professionals assembled. We have political leaders, police chiefs, directors, and department heads, and members of the community. I have prioritized building meaningful and sustainable relationships geared towards seeking solutions to challenges and accomplishing goals. I appreciate all the support that has been built over the years. There are some in this room that I have known for more than half of my life, which date back to grade school. I'm not going to share. Mal, Chief Alwood, Chief Ayers, and it's a couple other here in this room. When something is established, it is defined as something that has been in existence for a long time, recognized and generally accepted. These relationships are established, and the benefactors will be the residents of this great city of Bowie and the members of our department. I commit that we will also be a help to others to support the collective goal of serving our respective communities. I acknowledge the presence of my predecessor, Chief John Nesky. We worked together for 12 years and accomplished significant growth in community support during this time. Our relationship was complementary, and we were an effective team. To our residents and business leaders in the city, know that I am committed to excellence and have served with integrity, honesty, and commitment for over 33 years. Rendering service to each of you as though you are a part of my family is my guarantee. This commitment is not one from me, but will also be the standard which will be expected from every member and service rendered by this department. I look forward to hearing your concerns and to working together to ensure your concerns are heard and to provide sustainable solutions to address your concerns. As I close, to the men and women of the Bowie Police Department, know that it is my responsibility to serve you. Great leaders must be first willing to serve and care for those that they lead. I care for each of you and will do all that is in my power to ensure that you have the resources and support that you need. The department has earned the support of this community by treating all people fairly, by serving and caring, and this was achieved by being consistent day in and day out. I thank everyone for their collective support and continued partnership. Thank you.
Everybody bunch you real quick. Right here, everybody. One, two, everybody right here. Right here. One more. Thank you.
One is in the back. And I would like to quickly say thank you to all who have shown up, particularly those, as the chief acknowledged, in law enforcement, who make our lives possible. And when others are running away, run to the fight. And so to all of you who are here this evening, I want to give from myself, the council, but also, more importantly, from the people of Prince George's County and the city of Bowie, a hearty thank you and God bless you. I take it a lot of people don't want to hear the rest of this exciting agenda? No, please, go right ahead. For those looking to participate, there is a reception in room 243 upstairs.
There is a reception upstairs in room 243. You don't want to miss that. It's really good cake to have there.
If you would, those who are looking to participate, please move up to room 243 for the reception. We will have to resume the council meeting. Oh, she's there. Madam City Clerk, do we have any city boards and committees this evening?
No, Mayor, we do not.
At this time, we will do council announcements, and I would like to start off in asking all of us to take a moment of silence for the memory of former Senator Douglas J.J. Peters. Douglas Peters was a member of this city council, a member of the county council, served on the Senate for the state of Maryland, was on the Board of Regents, and contributed many other things to this community and to our state and our nation as a whole. So if you would, please join with me in a moment of silence for his family and for all those who are connected to him and who have worked with him. Thank you so very much. At this time, I will open it to the council. Councilmember Ndubamadu.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. A couple announcements this evening. If I could just also ask us to take another moment of silence for the young man from Bowie who was killed on New Year's Eve in Fort Washington. He was 21 years old, Jerry Saunders, who passed away on New Year's Eve. So if we could just take a moment of silence for him as well and his family, that would be great. Thank you, everyone. So 3 big announcements for District 4 and also that will impact the rest of the city of Bowie. I'll start off with the most recent. I just want to thank my colleagues on the city council as well as city staff and all of our elected officials, particularly County Council Member Watson, as well as our school board member Zipporah Miller for the announcement that it has been recommended that Pointer Ridge remain open, Pointer Ridge Elementary remain open. That was a really, really long battle that we had been fighting for a very long time. So it was really amazing to see that our superintendent did make the recommendation to the school board for Pointer Ridge Elementary to remain open and also serve as the regional site for a new autism program that will be located at Pointer Ridge Elementary. And with that new autism program, it is projected that the enrollment numbers will go up to about 80%. So that's really great news. So that was the first announcement for District 4. The second announcement that's specific to the city of Bowie, but also District 4, is regarding another really, really great thing for the Education Committee. And I really do want to thank so many members of this body, as well as County Council Member Watson, again, our school board member Zipporah Miller. We did gain approval of a STEM charter school. Friendship will be coming to the city of Bowie, which is absolutely wonderful and amazing. The last time Prince George's County approved a charter school was in 2018. This will be the first STEM school that is a charter school in Prince George's County, and it's going to be housed in Bowie. So that is an amazing accomplishment for this city council. I just want to say thank you to our mayor, who also stood alongside and fought really hard with me to make sure that we get that school. That school is being proposed to be located in District 4. No secret here. I will be hosting a roundtable discussion for all stakeholders, and as well as our mayor will be hosting that together in the next coming weeks, just to make sure that we are in alignment. The school is proposed to open at the end of 2024 fall season for grades K and 1, so about 120 students will be able to register for fall enrollment this year, and it is being proposed to be located at South Lake in District 4. So I just want to let you know, I will keep everybody updated on those progressions when the lease is signed and once we make enough headway on that. And then the last thing is, last year we passed a pilot program for after-school care. I do want to let everybody know that will be based at Yorktown. So starting on January 16th, we will have a City of Bowie sponsored after-school program that will start for grades 3 through 8. It's going to be located at Yorktown Elementary. It will take place 2 times a week being Tuesdays and Thursdays from 6 to 7:30 p.m. It is open for enrollment now, so if you know anybody that has any children that are City of Bowie residents, grades 3 through 8, they can go on, let me read you the website, www.artplaylearn.com/play2learn, and you can sign up to register your child, grades 3 through 8. That will be going on until the end of the school year, and it will be based at Yorktown Elementary after school. So thank you so much to the City Council who voted along in favor of that pilot program. And if you have any questions, you know where to find me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments from any other council members? Okay, thank you. Hearing none, we will move on to the city manager's report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, and residents out there at Television Land. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to thank you for acknowledging my friend and neighbor, Doug J.J. Peters. He was a fine fellow. We communicated often. He was very concerned about Bowie, and 8 years ago, he was the first guy that took me to lunch and talked to me about what things should be in this city, and we're going to miss him. And also, I'd like to point out that our HR department has been really busy the last couple of months. Aside from going through the exhaustive search to get Chief Dwayne Preston here to take charge of our police department, we also got Nick Spurgeon to take charge of our community services department, and Lori Cunningham to take charge as the assistant director of that department. That department has over 120 people in it and a varied mission. So the next task for our HR department is to find us the best qualified deputy chief of police. All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you, city manager. At this time, we will move to the consent agenda. I will entertain any motions. I second. It's been moved and properly second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, please respond with an aye. Aye. I was giving you a chance to do the vote.
Oh, wait a minute.
The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Thank you. Technology. We have no old business, is that correct, City Clerk? We will now move on to the new business and the council budget guidance for fiscal year 2025. City staff, city manager.
Mr. Mayor, we'd like to hand off to Byron Matthews, our finance director.
Thank you, Mr. Lott. Good evening, council, mayor. My name is H. Byron Matthews. I'm the finance director for the city of Bowie. And today I'd like to present to you the council's budget guidance for FY 2025. I will try not to be too lengthy, since you have received this on Thursday, and our citizens have received it as well. So I'll try to be brief and just hit the areas I really think are necessary. But I'll also try to be thorough as well. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was just the successes for FY23. And that first success is exceeding the fund balance policy of 25%. Our fund balance for FY23 actually is at 75%, and that is the entire fund balance. The next item I'd like to speak to is the general fund's fund balance increase for FY23. The fund balance increased by $2.6 million during the last fiscal year. The management team at the City of Bowie also maintained the city's AAA rating during the year, as all three rating agencies reaffirmed our AAA bond rating. The constant tax rate over the last 15 years, the city has maintained that 40 cents per $100 of assessed taxable value, which is a major feat, and you need to be congratulated on that. Robust core services. As you know, mostly our core services include housing inspection, police, recreation, snow removal, leaf collection, youth services, the senior center, and parks and grounds, to name just a few. Also, the development at South Lake and Medford. We've done quite well with those developments, and I think we are all aware of what's going on there. We have the single-family housing at South Lake, as well as apartments and townhouses, and Medford being more of a mixed-use area. We have businesses, we have residential, we have commercial hotels there as well. The next slide represents the total personnel over the last 10 years. As you can see, our personnel for full-time equivalent in 2014 was 362. We are now budgeted at 435. I show this particular slide because the personnel costs, as we know, the general fund and way the city runs, the most expensive part of our expenditure pie is personnel cost. Our personnel cost makes up about 54% of the general fund budget. And as you can see over the last 10 years, how personnel costs, this also includes benefits, has tracked over the last 10 years. The next slide shows the current trends of general fund revenue, expenditures, and the fund balance in our proposed years based on our FY24 budget. So we kind of laid this out so that you can see that our proposed fund balance decrease in 25, 26, 27, an increase in 28, flat in 29, and again, a decrease in 2030. Council and management responsibilities. The mission for today is to talk about a balanced budget and what it actually means. In In most cases, a balanced budget means that revenues will match or exceed expenditures during a budget cycle. It also includes the use of the fund balance if management decides to do that. So this evening, the meeting purpose and why we've gathered here today. We need to establish a framework for the FY 2025 budget. Establishing the framework, we need to set budget priorities and parameters, as well as emphasize the importance of using the CIP as a strategic plan for financing and project planning tool. In addition, we must consider when we add new capital projects that recurring operating costs that we receive in maintaining that particular facility. We also must consider our debt affordability. How much debt is the city willing to shoulder? And last but not least, we need to reevaluate the current property tax rate and ensuring that that is the rate that the city needs to be, or what that rate should be as we move forward in the upcoming years. The budget framework. Reaffirm our core services. We must determine if some of those core services can be deleted, modified. We also must establish the tax rate, as I mentioned before, for FY 25. Right now, it's 40 cents per $100 of taxable assessment. Examine the need for new capital projects. Examine the funding strategy for the capital projects and equipment acquisition fund. Both funds receive most of their revenue as a general fund transfer. The equipment acquisition and replacement fund allows the city to save money on an annual basis by putting away for a rainy day, so to speak. Each year, with council's approval, we put money away for future equipment purchases. So on the day that or the year that we need to purchase that equipment, we don't have to do any outside borrowing to purchase it. We have the money in our cash reserves. And last, we must establish the water and sewer rates for 2025. The city faces some current threats, and I tried to reduce them to the ones I thought were the most important. Human capital, as City Manager Lott just referred to. It is very difficult in this environment with unemployment so low to attract and maintain qualified individuals to provide a service for the city of Bowie. Another threat is the supply chain, lack of both goods and services, and not only the goods, but just the coordination and the logistics of having materials available. So we see price increases with that supply chain. Also, cost of inflation. It appears that we're going in the right direction with inflation. We're about 3.5%, 3%, and slowly going down to the 2% target from the Federal Reserve. The other item is declining intergovernmental revenues. What are intergovernmental revenues? We look at it at first glance. The revenues include state shared revenues, which include income tax, admission and amusement tax, motor vehicle tax, police protection, and financial corporation tax. However, federal and state grants are another source of potential revenue for the city and may be accessible if we have some qualified projects to receive it. Next is the budget development schedule. This is just a calendar way of looking at our budget process. As in January today, we are meeting with council to get their input on how they see the budget, the things that they are looking to do, things they want to achieve, and be able to get that mandate from you to the city manager to share with department heads. So that information will be included in their budget. Right now, staff is pulling their budgets together, working on things for their budget meetings with the city manager, which he does a detailed budget review for each department. And as you know, the city of Bowie uses zero-based budgeting. What does that mean for us? For the citizen, that means we look at each expenditure each year. We do not do percentage increases for our expenditures. Department may need something one year, but may not need it the next year. So we should always see fluctuation of up and down in our expenditures. Some of the expenditures are just one-time items. So that's important to know. In March, the Finance Department will be making the necessary revenue projections and prepare a summary for the city manager's review and edit. In April, the city manager will present his proposed budget. In April, we normally, according to code, have to have that done between the 10th and the 15th of April. We'll hold our budget sessions through April and May, and hopefully at the end of May, we will reach a conclusion where we can adopt a budget. Physical policies. These physical policies have been established over the year via the Finance Department and City Council. Capital financing, debt management, fund balance, revenue and expenditures, and capital projects. We have fiscal policies for each of these items. These financial policies are listed in our budget book for all residents and council to see and review. Capital financing. The city would not use long-term borrowing to finance current operations or normal maintenance and expenditures. The city will maintain a high reliance on pay-as-you-go financing for all capital improvements. So what is pay-go or pay-as-you-go? It allows us to save before we spend. Council will make a determination that this is a project that they want to do. We'll start putting money aside so we can initiate that project. Issue debt for major projects that are included in the capital projects fund. The city is not an annual issuer of general obligation bonds. We have normally done that when there is a major project. As you're aware, the City Hall was one of the major projects, and the ice arena was one as well. But the remaining capital projects are funded from the general fund transfer. Debt management. All debt issued must be repaid within the period not to exceed the expected useful life of the improvement. The city will maintain its tax-supported bonded debt at a level not to exceed 8% of the assessed value of its property. The ratio of debt service to expenditures as a percentage of general fund revenues should not exceed 10%. I think at the end of 2023, that ratio was 4.1%. Fund balance. The city will maintain a fund balance not less than 25% of its revenue. We use this, and that's what we've been doing basically over the last 10 years. We have been drawing down our fund balance to finance our capital projects, and that's been a good strategy for us. I think it's working well. However, it's not sustainable because at some point in time, that fund balance is going to be below your requirement. So we have to maintain that equilibrium between that 25% as you mandated and what we're actually doing in our future years. I wanted to show this to you because there's a lot of conversation about the general fund balance and what has happened to it over the last 10 years, and the city is spending all of its money and it doesn't have any money. So I just wanted to basically rebuke that and show you that this is our general fund balance over the last 10 years. In 2014, it was about 39 million. Right now, it's about 45 million at the end of 2023. Now, the fund balance takes in consideration all funds as it relates to our restricted funds, our funds held for commitments, and funds held for assignments that we have. So when you look at this, you must see what the unassigned fund balance is. The unassigned fund balance is the money that's available for new expenditures. So as you can see from 2014, the unassigned fund balance was 32 million. As of 2023, it's down to 22 million. And as I was saying earlier, what we have done over these 10 years is that we've been using that fund balance to fund our capital projects, our equipment acquisition, and also all the increases that we've had over those 10-year periods because we have not raised the property tax. Another slide so you can just see the numbers in a different perspective on this line graph. The general fund balance on top, the assigned fund balance on the bottom, and you can see how they're tracking there. The fund balance policy, just to reiterate that, the city's council adopted a policy to maintain the general fund balance at a level no lower than 25% of expenditures. In FY23, general fund expenditures totaled 60 million, and then the ending fund balance totaled 45 million. So this represents about 75%. Your policy is 25%, so we're at 75% of the total fund balance. Revenues and expenditures. Again, to reiterate, the city will strive to adopt an annual budget where recurring expenditures match revenue. We will continue to provide council with a 5-year projection of revenue and expenditures for the general fund as well as the water and sewer fund, so you can have a kind of look into the future of the way we're tracking revenue and we're tracking expenditures to see if we need to raise taxes or raise water rates in order to maintain an even keel and stay within your policy. On an annual basis, the city will set rates for the water and sewer level so that it runs self-sufficiently. Right now, there are no tax dollars being used to support the water and sewer fund. The revenue generated by the water and sewer fund comes directly from metered water sales. One-time, non-recurring revenues shall be used to finance capital projects. For example, a one-time revenue includes, but are not limited to, proceeds from the sale of property, capital grants, and other infrequent, non-recurring revenue. The use of one-time revenue for financing ongoing operating expenditures is strongly discouraged. Capital project hierarchy. This hierarchy basically represents the flow in which we will address all new capital projects. First, mandates from federal, state, and county governments. Secondly, to improve city amenities that promote health and wellness. Third, restoration of aging infrastructure and buildings. And lastly, new capital projects. Capital project spending. As we set these priorities, I've tried to list here some of the major capital projects that we're working on, and most of them have the priority because they are required or there is some government intervention. EPA, the Chesapeake Bay is a major project. That's a mandate by EPA. The special taxing districts are special taxes for the ponds that we have, mostly being taken care of by the commercial areas that feed into that runoff into the ponds. The pipe replacement and recapitalization program, facilities maintenance. Here's another way that council established, which has been very unique for us, is that each year in our capital projects budget, council approves a certain dollar amount to maintain all of our facilities. So when it's time to make some repairs or new roof, new air conditioning units, whether it be electrical upgrades, in most cases we already had that money saved, so that's no additional tax burden on the residents. The other priorities are the ice arena, basketball courts, and the golf course. And it's always a question whether or not do we set a moratorium on new capital projects. We must consider whether or not it's feasible to cancel some of our current projects that have not been developed yet. And we need to keep doing a cost-benefit approach to determine whether or not those programs and projects should go forward. The main funding sources for all of our capital projects, as I referred earlier in my presentation, is pay-go, pay-as-you-go. The other option that we have is general obligation bonds, federal and state grants, transfers from the general fund, and partnerships with Maryland National Park and Planning, and Prince George's County. The next slide, Mayor and Council, is a schedule of CIP transfers from the general fund proposed in 2026, 7, 8, 9, and 2030. As you can see, each one of those requires significant amount of funds to program and spend on capital projects. And my comment to all of that, the transfers from the general fund for capital improvements are not sustainable in their current configuration. Trends of major revenues and sources. This is a look at our general fund revenues and expenditures over the last 10 years. We can see where we have revenues, where revenues are for FY22 and FY23, where revenues exceeded our expenditures. Now, I just want council and mayor to be mindful that sometimes the increase in our revenue during a particular year is due to the fact that some projects were postponed, some expenditures were postponed. The major hit is not being able to fully employ all of our assigned police officers. So that's money that we're not spending. And that goes throughout the organization when it's very difficult for us to fill these positions. Everyone would like to know that your property in the city of Bowie is rising each particular year. And that's good for homeowners, it's good for the city, and it shows that the value of real property in the city of Bowie is holding its own, and it's growing at a pace of 3 to 4% a year. General fund major revenue categories. Wanted to show you, these are our main sources of revenue, and as I was speaking earlier, property tax, both real and personal, our state shared revenue, which I covered earlier, and just other general revenues coming from our services that we provide. This is a 10-year graph of our income tax revenue, and as you can see that it began to dip in FY23. We're expecting a little smaller dip in FY24 based off the projections that we're hearing from the state government. But as you can see, we basically had steady growth. Highway user revenue, the most talked about revenue source from the state. We're not at the levels that we used to receive back in the early 2000s, but we are recouping some of that money, as you can see. Our first dip was in FY23, and this was my reference to the declining intergovernmental revenue pieces. So that's a risk for us. This particular revenue, this highway user revenue, is what we use to refurbish the streets resurfacing, resurfacing the trails and the bike lanes as well. This revenue source is kind of an outlier. It's not our major revenue source, but I just wanted to show you where we are at with our speed camera revenue. And this is before the adding of the new speed cameras So we should see that in FY '24 and '25. But there was a serious uptick in speed camera violations in FY '23. My final slide is, let me go right back. Sorry about that. The city's financial position is strong, as demonstrated by the affirmation of the city's AAA bond rating from Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch. The general fund balance and the unassigned fund balance as a percentage of general fund expenditures are 75% and 36%. Any questions or comments? I'd like to give this back to City Manager Lott, and I'll wait to hear anything that you want to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Byron. As Byron pointed out, in the first 10 days or so of April, by charter and code, I'm required to present a budget to the council, to the city council, based on what I know and what the staff needs and what projects are already in existence and what policies are already in place. And of course, after that, we'll go through a budget review process. I think we have 5 or 6 work sessions with the objective to get to the middle of May and you pass the budget. So at this point, I'd like to hand it back to the mayor, and I'm seeking whatever guidance or suggestions you all would like to present to me that I can make note of and put into my calculations as I get ready to meet the requirements of the charter in April. Thank you, sir.
First and foremost, thank you, City Manager, but also thank you, Byron, for and the staff for the economic guidance and the financial wherewithal that you present for the citizens of Bowie, but also as you help us in making the decisions of what's best for the citizens of Bowie. I'd like to just present a couple of things to you at this point that I would like to see us do emphasis, and I think we'll talk more as we get into it, but there are a couple of things I'd like to see some emphasis done. And number one, and Byron, you mentioned it, that's on recruitment and retention for public safety. I think we've got to make sure that that's at the top of our list of what we're trying to do. And again, this is my feelings, and we'll get the input from all of the council, but I really believe that has to be a strong emphasis that we do going in. I also think that when we look at how our revenues are developed and devised from our tax rate and other things, I think we really need to look at putting in place a very robust economic development plan. And that means supporting what we need to do within the city staff, as all, because we've continued to ask to do more with less. But I think it's important that we look at funding what we do from an economic development standpoint to assist in developing those dollars to be able to do those things we want to do and what makes sense. I'd also, from a standpoint of, as we look at what's going on within our population, I'd like for us to make sure that we continue to have at the top of our list when it comes to accessibility as we're getting older, making sure that all of our facilities that we do have, that we continue to make sure that they're accessible to all of our citizens, particularly as many choose to age in place. We still want the city of Bowie to be a place that can accommodate them as well. And that goes not only in the current spaces that we have, but even as we look at doing, for example, the remodeling and what we're going to do with Allen Pond. Though we've got that grant, that money to do that, I would love to make sure that we make it the most accessible facility possible so that everyone can enjoy it. And then my last thing will go back to something you also mentioned. We see that the revenues that we're getting from transportation and other things from the state are going down. But I think one of the things about Bowie that we love is the trails and the paths that we have. And I think we need to make sure that we continue to have that, though those revenues are going down, that we as a city look at making that a priority to maintain the ambiance and the city as a whole, as we know it. So for myself, those are just a few things that I think will be important from my perspective as we move forward. And I guess last with that, I would say, as we move forward on doing those things, I would give you that challenge of saying, what can we do at our current level? If we were not to increase taxes, what could we accomplish of what we've mandated in the past and what we need to do, and what would we have to do without if we didn't do that? I know that can be a little challenging at times as we go through, but I think as we talk about what we want and what we can afford, I think that will help us as we talk about where we go from forward as a city. So having said that, at this time, I'd like to open it up to my other colleagues for any comments at this time that they may have. Anyone? Councilmember Ndumamadu?
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Couple questions. First off, really informative and great presentation. So thank you, Mr. Matthews. This is very helpful. One question is really much more for the public, but I really want to just get a confirmation. When you talk about speed camera infraction revenues, I just want to make sure that I articulate and confirm with you. That's $923 for 2023, right? $22,000. Okay, just want to make sure I emphasize that. Okay, awesome. And then a second question is, can you elaborate a little bit more on human capital challenges?
From my perspective, Councilwoman, I'm looking at the broad economic term that is associated with human capital, and that's dealing with education, training, skills, and other experiences that individuals hold and have. We are, as you know, a municipality, but we are challenged to get the best candidate in the marketplace that we can get. And sometimes we have limitation on that because we are a municipality and that our salaries don't rise as fast as in the corporate area. So we have to have other items that we are providing. And a lot of it is Mr. Lott has instilled allowed us to have a telework process. And that allowed us to garner some new employees that we would not have received. But the market itself is pretty tight. People have many options. We have people that sign up for interviews, and on the day of the interview, they just don't show up because they had a better offer from someplace else. So we're constantly trying to come up with new ideals and strategies, and Mr. Lott can speak more to that. I'm just on the finance side of it. I'm seeing the money trail when we have variances because those variances show that we were unable to fill the position at a given time.
I'd just like to add in that we are very similar to a lot of organizations that we face the demographic trends. We have a lot of our employees that have been long tenured that are up for retirement. So we are losing years of experience as folks retire out, and that's changing our workforce. When we do have applications, we are receiving fewer applications for positions than we historically had. Mr. Byron Matthews mentioned about people not showing up for interviews. That does happen at a greater frequency than we've had in the past. So the overall environment in terms of attracting people in, we are getting good people in. It's taking longer to recruit. Some of our vacant positions are staying vacant for longer as we search, and we've had to re-advertise. Our Human Resources Department has, I think if you look back to the pre-pandemic, we do about 50% more searches in a given year for positions than we were before the pandemic. So the overall trends that you see in the marketplace, we experience them as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that explanation. That's very helpful. I think one of the things that I do want to highlight before I move on to core services are around human capital. I think that challenge is only going to get worse. I'm in the field of technology. AI has been a really big trend in the displacement of the workforce. And so I think really just figuring out how we're thinking about that in this budget cycle is really going to be important, because I think we're kind of on the cusp of that, I guess you would say the Industrial Revolution 5.0, some would argue. And so I think just figuring out how we're thinking about that so more people aren't displaced in the coming year is going to be very important for us. So I think that's something that I would look forward to in this budget cycle, because I really don't want the day to come where, you know, many Prince George's County or other small governments say, or mid-sized governments say, hey, we're going to adopt these use cases for AI, and then a ton of people are out of jobs. So I really want us to figure out how we get ahead of that. And you might already be doing that, and we don't know about it yet. And so during this budget cycle, I'd like to just kind of see if there are any type of workforce training initiatives that we're looking at, how much that's going to cost us, just really what investment is going to be necessary so that our workforce isn't displaced and the problem isn't exacerbated. So that's kind of the first area for me when it comes to human capital. I think the second area is you talked about and you highlighted core services. When we think about evaluating core services, I think that's going to be really important too as well, because as Mayor Adams stated, looking at how do we keep the tax rate the same and not looking at an increase is one of the options here. But what impact does that have on core services? And are there some core services that might be outdated? I don't know the answer to that, but I think it would be helpful for us to get an idea or a picture of if there are core services that are not as utilized or are essentially redundant or could be eliminated, what those areas are and what that savings could look like. Or, you know, if we need to update core services and go in a different direction, that will be helpful for us to also advise on the budget process. Then when I think of infrastructure, you had mentioned federal grants. I think thinking more about, I know we talked about some of the partnerships that we have with Maryland National Capital Parks and Plannings and other agencies, but really taking a look at, and you could have already done this and I'm just unaware, but looking at PPPs a little bit more often. I don't know that we've done that as often per se in terms of like in different areas, but for particular infrastructure improvements, seeing if there are areas of opportunity there. I know the mayor talked about Allen Pond, just looking at some opportunities, because I think given the times that we are, there's a little bit of a frustration when it comes to supply chain, but there's also potentially could be an opportunity. So looking at more, if there are other PPPs that we could be looking at, more partnerships, that would be also helpful. And also targeted federal grants. I know under the smart cities bucket or the technology bucket, there are a number of federal grants out there, and a lot of people don't leverage them. And I understand that some of those applications are through the county, and we have to tackle onto the county's application or the state's application. But I've seen areas in where the county may have not applied for a particular federal grant, and because they are not applying, we are allowed to apply on our own as a municipality because the county's not applying. So if there are areas of opportunity when it comes to infrastructure, particularly under smart cities, because essentially that's what I think there's a large pot of money for that, and a lot of people are not leveraging it accordingly. Just figuring out where that opportunity is and how we can get some of that pot of that money, even if the county's not going after it. And I think I saw your mic come on. Did you want to respond?
Yes, I just
Okay,
wanted
sure.
to remind you of the federal grant opportunities for the city of Bowie. We're normally in a very secure financial status, and we many times are not eligible for federal grants or state grants because of our funding base. It is hard to tell someone that you need money when they look at your financial statements and see that you have, $25 million in cash. So I know our grants department is working feverishly with our department heads to find out if there's any grant opportunities out there, and we'll continue to pursue that. But most of the grants are on need base, and it makes it difficult. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you for adding that perspective into the conversation. I think that's helpful. The reason why I keep highlighting smart cities just for awareness, because this is my realm in my day job, smart cities is technically oftentimes bucketed as innovation. And so there are a number of funding for pilot projects to show use cases and examples of how technology or innovation can impact infrastructure, particularly in the field of Internet of Things, sensors, artificial intelligence, things of that sort. And I think the federal government is looking for examples. And so because there may be large areas of opportunities there, it's why I'm amplifying that for us to maybe take a broader and deeper look there, because there may be some areas where it may not be focused on need-based, but more so pilot use case, let us show an example from a federal perspective of what our innovative thought process is looking like. So I think that might be an area of opportunity that I'd love to hear more about this budget cycle. And then I think the last one is on economic development, like the mayor had mentioned earlier. One of the things that I've been thinking about that I will likely bring before this council, probably in February or March when I'm done writing it, is a conversation on business improvement districts. I have had an opportunity to talk to some of the property owners in District 4 in particular, just my district, and I know that there are a number of them who would be interested in a business improvement district, and I know that Washington, D.C. does this pretty well, where they designate particular areas as an improvement district, and essentially what happens is the property owners in that area, they pay an extra, I don't want to say an extra tax, but they pay, let's call it an extra tax for layman's purposes. They pay an extra tax to the city, in which the city then gives majority of that money. Of course, they take a percentage for running the transaction, but they give I would say like 95% of that money to the nonprofit, and the nonprofit that runs that business improvement district. A number of the property owners that I've spoken to and landowners in District 4 said they would be willing to do something like that in the city of Bowie, because essentially what happens with this business improvement district is it has the opportunity to really help that given area. I'm speaking to my constituency, has the opportunity to help that given area when it comes to business recruitment, retention, sidewalk cleanups, maybe minor infrastructure, security, things like that. So it's like an added benefit for the businesses in that area to ensure the vitality, the economic vitality of that area. I'm not saying that's going to be a large revenue source for us, but essentially it could serve as another potential minor revenue source for us, but then also serve to improve economic development within the city. If those property owners across the city, I know District 4 would be interested because I've spoken to most of them, if those property owners would be interested in joining this business improvement district, we would essentially designate what those areas are. It doesn't have to be the entire city, could be key targeted economic development areas in the city to really boost activity and also generate more revenue in a broader sense. So I would love to honestly get your thoughts on that, see if there's a way that that could fit in, if what that looks like, if that's more of a 2025 goal, 2026, or if that's something that we could implement later in 2024, how much we could possibly gain from that, what that could look like. That way I could take that back to the business owners, also bring them forward and bring that conversation to the rest of our council so that we could discuss it and see if that's something that we'd be willing to take on to improve economic development and also possibly get more money for the city. I think that's all my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment? Councilwoman Rogers?
Thank you. Just a couple comments. I think the city manager asked if there was anything else that we would be interested in seeing, and I think that Councilwoman Ededumadu, kind of hit upon some of the things, but from a more general level, one thing that I'm accustomed to during budget processes is looking at operational efficiencies. And if you were to ask me what else would I be looking for, would be that. And that is either through looking at technology, which was mentioned, or looking at operational improvements and workflow, trying to get efficiencies out of that. I find that the best ideas come from the people that actually do the work. So maybe if it's some type of program where an incentive type employee program that allows employees to provide recommendations, but it's all about operational efficiencies because HR is your biggest cost. You don't want to significantly impact the amenities and the services that are provided. I recognize economic development is very key and very important, but in general, if I were to look at your package, that's one thing that I would like to see what the ideas are as far as making the city more efficient. When I looked at the numbers for the number of staff and trying to correlate it to how large the city has grown, you probably have not grown that significantly as the number of residents that have moved into the community. But it's always good to, look and see how you can cut some corners. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Any other council members? Councilmember Steph?
Figuring out how this thing works. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the report, Mr. Matthews. One quick question. It was $923,000 in revenue from the speed camera program in 2023. Do we know off the top of our head what the cost of running that program is?
The cost runs about... Thank you. The cost runs anywhere between $350,000 and $375,000. That's basically the management of the cameras and the fees that were charged by the vendor.
Okay, so we're making back about 2/3 of the revenue from that program. This might be outside your area of expertise, so I apologize. Do we know if that's the case with the new speed program that we're implementing?
You want to go ahead? Not up and running.
It's too early. We're going to need several months to really see what the impact of that is. These are moving into secondary roads, so there's going to be, a difference from what the trend had been previously.
Understood. One bit of feedback I've frequently gotten on the speed camera program and what's consistent with, I know, with what our own police department has said that they want for the program is that it not be leaned on too heavily purely as a revenue generator. I know that, for the money that it's bringing in, it'd be hard to describe it as such. I'm wondering if we could have a conversation about earmarking funds from the speed camera program specifically for law enforcement related activities. Is that something that staff might have a thought on?
I don't think that's really going to be necessary to do. It all goes into the general fund, and the volume of law enforcement funds that we expend greatly exceeds the amount that's coming in terms of the speed camera revenue. Specifically earmarking it, it may be a good political point to make, but it won't have any practical purpose for the budget.
Additionally, you can expect with the new cameras that whatever the revenue is, it's going to significantly drop in a short period of time when people start to comply. So it's not something you can really, we should treat this as a service provided to slow people down as opposed to with any consideration for the revenue, because the evidence shows that over time, people slow down.
Understood. In the presentation, it was featured fairly prominently as a revenue generator, which is why I bring it up. But I appreciate that feedback, Mr. City Manager. One general comment. I agree with a lot of the sentiments expressed by my colleagues, Mayor Adams and Councilmember Ndibu Madu, especially with an emphasis on focusing on public safety recruitment and retention. Looking at a more robust economic development strategy, we've already taken many steps. But if we need to beef up our staff, and if my colleagues have ideas about what we want that to look like, I'm very open to that conversation. Completely agreement about ADA improvements and accessibility, improving trails and paths. I totally hear and acknowledge my colleagues on taxes. I spent 7 years on the council being adamantly opposed to tax increases. And then I spent my 8th year very aggressively warming my constituents up for the possibility that we would have to raise taxes in the near future. I think that realistically, looking at the trends, we're going to have to talk about it this year. On our list of things to do are a lot of new things, on top of the fact that we're going to see declining shared state revenue as the state grapples with a $500 million budget deficit. Probably little to no federal help to the state in future years, especially if we end up with a divided government moving forward at the federal level. and a continued declination of shared revenue, especially from transportation, which we rely on heavily. I just think, given those headwinds, we're going to have to look very carefully at this. I know every year, you know, we want to find that magic thing in the budget that we can live without, that's going to balance our books and prevent us from having to raise taxes. And hey, if we find that, I'm open to that conversation. I really am. I'm not opposed to cutting things that we think are unnecessary or redundant in any way. I can just say from experience, spending a lot of time talking to residents about this issue specifically, I've yet to find that thing that there's a consensus around cutting, especially as far as services. In public safety, public works, community services, a desire to maintain our legacy facilities at a time when a lot of stuff is just aging in the city, from sidewalks to streets to a lot of the buildings and services we offer. I think realistically, we really just need to level with voters about, you know, the situation we're facing, and just be honest with our constituents about what we're looking at, and you know, and be prepared for some real discussion and disagreement around some of these things. Otherwise, I'm with my colleagues, just with the caveat that I think we are going to have to look seriously at raising taxes in the event that we don't find a consensus around what we're willing to cut. And with that, I appreciate staff's time, and I look forward to this budget cycle.
Mr. Mayor, just one point I'd like to make. There is a plan in place, working plan, for us to recruit more police officers. It's going to be significantly more than what we've done in the past. And the new chief's working on that right now.
Mayor Pro Tem Wolfe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate it. First of all, thank you, staff, for a great presentation. As always, a lot of good work goes into it, and we are well pleased with how we are financially, and there are a lot of people that go into that, so a lot of work that goes into that, so thank you. As usual, I have a few questions. First, I want to make a comment before I forget on the speed camera. I know we have the revenue there, and to Councilwoman Rogers' point about automation and efficiencies, I think that really represents a great example of that. I look at it with the cost that you're giving of $300,000 or so. I suspect that equates to about 2 police officers in terms of costs. Once you add up all the salaries, benefits, retirement, police cruisers, and everything else, may even go a bit over that. And you look at the efficiency that you get, even if there were no revenues that were really that appreciable, they're certainly paying for itself, and I think it certainly frees up in our time of short staff the police officers for more pressing matters. So good job with everybody moving that forward, and the new cameras. I'm not looking for it to be a big revenue number. I'm expecting, just hoping to slow down traffic. Couple other things. The first thing I want to talk about is forecasts. Consistently over the years, we've had a forecast that reflects a downward trend, or perhaps even a spiral, for our revenue, for our general fund balances, based on conservative estimate of revenues and a shall we say, a higher than or a worst case scenario for expenditures, which yields in the end an answer that says we're broke sooner than we actually are. And as we've seen through the numbers you presented today, that in fact the fund balance has been going up. Which is not a problem, not complaining. The question becomes, though, as we're looking at tax rates and discussing about increasing tax rates, we really need to come to terms with what it's actually going to look like. Given that we've seen the pattern, and it's hard to say, okay, I'm going to go raise taxes when I consistently outperform my expectations. And so I'm wondering if, as you're going through this budget cycle, if you could take a look at the trends in the forecasts that we've had in the past budgets, and what's actually come to fruition, and to see if there's some way that we can optimize to come to some realistic, forecast of to where we're going to be. I don't think, and I'm not sticking my head in the sand. I clearly see that monies are hard to come by, and expenses are coming in left and right, and there's no doubt that we have an issue. But the question is exactly, how much we might need, or if we can survive a little longer, or what the plan might be. But I think we really need the data on that. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Matthews?
Well, as I shared with you earlier, I'd like you to understand that though we are showing an increase in the fund balance, it also relates to the fact that projects are not being done. Say, for example, in communications, we were trying to do CCTV cameras, and in that projection, we had more than $1 million budgeted for that item. That didn't happen in FY23. We're still trying to work out the logistics on that and get someone to come aboard and provide that service to us. So that's $1 million there. And if you look at the police department, who were not able to be at full level, if that happened, then that $2.6 million increase in the fund balance would have dissipated. We would have been in the negative. So we really have to be careful when we're looking at increasing taxes and looking at the actual expenditures that occur, because we have to budget for the position during the year as though it's going to be filled. If we don't, then we'll be visiting council, every other month asking for a supplemental to increase the budget so that we can hire additional employees. So there's some flexibility in there. I think our staff does a good job, and the city manager, along with the assistant city manager, does a good job in kind of flushing out these anomalies that are happening. But we are experiencing, in some cases, where we are just not able to complete a major project, which then results in an increase in our fund balance over that 1 year. Now, next year in 2025, if those CCTV cameras get installed, that $1 million is a hit to the fund balance.
Agreed.
Okay.
What we'll do, Mr. Wolfley, I think I understand what you're saying. In January, late January or February, when I am reviewing and cross-examining the directors, I intend to be even more vigilant in when I determine whether something is necessary or not, and so that we can, whether a project is accomplishable or not, and looking at both the supply chain issue, for example, our automation audio-video system here. It took us 2 years to get the main piece of equipment for that, but we had to budget for it both those years, and we had to maintain the money, and that was a significant amount of money. So, but we'll make an effort to be more accurate this year. One of the things that Byron mentioned is that in every city that I managed, I required the directors to be more exact and more knowledgeable of spending dollars. Sometimes people sign off. We don't allow that here. If a department director signs off spending $50, he or she needs to know what it's for, and what that does is that causes us here, as it did in Albany, because I built a fund balance there of $25 million from nothing. That causes everybody to look closer at what they spend, so we actually underspend our budget every year when you look at over the past, and I'm gonna continue to do that because there's no other way for me to do it. But to your point, we'll be more accurate, try to be more accurate with what we think we're gonna need. There are a couple of things we can't control. We can't control the assessments that's going up, and my house is worth a whole lot of money over there in Northridge now, and I don't know what you do with it, right? And of course, we'll try to stay on target with our spending plan so that we don't end up with a ghost fund balance, right? A fund balance that shows we got so much money, but when we have $2 million worth of projects to spend from last year. Okay? I got it.
Excellent, thank you. I want to carry on a little further now with the fund balance. We have 25% as our target. There are two issues I want to raise with that. The first is it the right number? We just went through COVID, so we had this, big emergency, went through a couple years of recovering through that. Is 25% adequate? Is 25% too much? I think that's something we ought to evaluate. We've got, for example, the water and sewer. We have a lot of experience under our belt as well as to what those costs look like and what the risks are to our infrastructure. There might be a need for more there or less. I don't know. But I would like to hear if 25% is still the right number. I think to a certain degree it was a number when it was chosen, and it was well below what the actual number was at the time. And I think it may now, having come through a number of crises and some urgencies, perhaps we ought to take a look at that and see if indeed that number is a good number. And I'm not leading it one way or the other. I could be convinced both ways. But one thing that I do think we ought to definitely do is reconsider what that 25% is against, which is right now I think the expenditures we have includes expenditures for capital expenses. So I think I've seen in the past where we've had a capital expense and all of a sudden we're not meeting our fund balance obligation because we expended some large amount on a capital project. And I don't think that that's what it really should reflect. I think it should reflect operating expenses. And it probably ought to be, that should be the target because it's what you're protecting against. If you're going to go build an ice arena, during that year that you're going to build it, you don't need an extra 25% of your budget on hand just because you're building an ice arena. So I would think that we would be in a position to evaluate what that looks like, but I think it makes more sense to just make it on operating expenditures as opposed to capital expenditures, at least major capital expenditures.
I want to make sure I understand your question. You're asking the CPA here and the other CPA, Lola, to come back and tell you what they think that it ought to be? Because this, of course, this is the council's standard. But,
yes, indeed.
Okay,
yeah.
Got it.
If I could, there is no right amount for a fund balance policy. It's basically going to be based on what the council is comfortable with. Good accounting practices from Maryland GFOA and our national GFOA say that you should have at least 5 months of fund balance that will cover your expenses for 5 months. And you will find out that a lot of the municipalities and governments have a much lower amount than the 25% that we've had. But we're one of the only municipalities that have a AAA bond rating. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons why we have it. And once you start messing with that number, it could cause some other repercussions that are unanticipated in that decision-making process. Mm-hmm. So we just need to be real careful about how we step towards looking to change the fund balance policy.
Right, and I think that's my point, where if the target is a 5-month target for cash on hand, if you will, fund balance, does 25% cover that? I'm not sure that it does.
I think right now the 25% probably exceeds it. Mm-hmm. And that's why the city is in such great shape. Mm-hmm. I think other municipalities envy the fact that City of Bowie has a 25% fund balance.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
And if they could do so, just like they have over the years incorporated your ideal for the equipment and replacement fund transaction. We see a lot of the municipalities over the last 15 years that have started to introduce that. And it helped to smooth out their operating expenses because they weren't looking to spend in 1 year, close to $2 million for police equipment, and then the next year you spend little or nothing, and the following year you're right back up to spending $2 million again. So I just think we need to tread lightly. We have the Financial Advisory Committee looking at the fund balance policy as well, and they will be coming to you with a recommendation on that.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, if you would continue to work with them, that would be great. Couple of other things. Our shared revenue, I'm preaching to the choir, we're going to be losing money there. We just have no control over that. The income tax I saw on page 29, it fluctuates a little bit. Do we have any insights as to what's driving that, or is it just surprise, open up the account and that's what we got?
Well, the income tax has a rollover period, so the years in which we're getting the money also includes some back years that the state provides to us. But as withholding tax are reduced, though our income tax money that we receive in the city will decline as well. The city is facing some financial hardships right now, and in their projections, they're showing less personal income tax as revenue for FY '24 and '25. And I tend to kind of look at that trend and see how it affects us. Sometimes we're not affected by what's happening in the state, and sometimes we are. So we just have to be totally tuned in to what's going on. And right now, we're just seeing a reduction in the amount of income tax that we're getting. So my bet is that next year, maybe the year after, our income tax will either decline or will be flat until the economy turns around a little bit.
And we don't hold that source data. We don't have the incomes of the people in the city of the Bowie. So our projections really come from trend and information that we get from the state when they let us know what they want to let us know.
Excellent. Thank you. Melford and South Lake impact, how far along are we on build out for them, and how much impact do you foresee for the coming year?
Well, on the Melford, we'll see revenue from the hotels and the residential apartments that they're putting up. But on the South Lake, we have a long way to go there, over at least 23 years or so before we start seeing revenue from South Lake.
Yeah, we can take a look at the building permits and what the trend has been with that. There've been a lot. It's been strong, so it's positive in terms of new real estate investment coming in. So we can take a look at that a little deeper and have that information for you.
Excellent, thank you. And as always, very much appreciate your good work on this. I will just say one thing as you're going through. Remember to be uncompromising in our ongoing core services. That's what differentiates us, and like to keep those going. And obviously, we'll do what we can to keep the overall costs down. But much appreciate your time, energy, and effort. Thank you all.
Thank you. I will continue on the first round. Councilman Truesdale.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much, city staff. Thank you, Byron, for this presentation. I'm sure that we're going to be talking a lot, coming up in April. So taxes will be one of the big issues that we will be tackling. But for the most part, I do agree with my colleague Rogers in saying that the workers, pretty much they gets the job done. And I guess my question is in terms of recruitment, and do we have, or is it possible that some type of long-term plan for employees beyond retirement can be established to where we can keep some of our good staff members, along with, public safety workers as well.
Well, Mr. Truesdell, the hardest thing that we do in the city is recruit for people. That is the toughest thing going on right now. I think Maryland's got a 1-point-some% unemployment rate. In this area is 3.5%, 4%. So every qualified person we want, 3 or 4 other people want them.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to, with regard to the police department, we're going to have to think like the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines in the recruitment effort. We're going to have to expand. We're going to have to start marketing, and for example, trying to find people who want to be police officers in a suburban community like ours. And so Chief Preston's working on that plan right now. With regard to the other employees, the critical CDL drivers, the competent park rangers, code enforcement people who know what they're doing and can get it right. Right now, we have been able to retain a lot of people, especially Byron mentioned a benefit of COVID-19, if I can use that term, was the fact that we went from 0 teleworkers to more than 150 teleworkers. Now we can offer that as a perk, if I may use, to recruit people, the white collar people in particular. Of course, the blue collar guys still got to show up every day, right? So we can take a look at what we can do to retain, or one of the things we did in Georgia, when somebody retired, but they had a critical skill, we used individual contracting to bring those people back to help supplement the operation. I know the University of Georgia does that I had a cousin who was a professor, retired, came back in a medium capacity, and he still teaches. So they didn't lose him, but he's not working full time. So we're going to look into that as a method of being able to keep people who retire. Since we don't have a defined benefit, we have a defined contribution. It will be easier for us to do that because we don't have to worry about the double dipping thing so much as other people.
Well, thanks again for this presentation, and look forward to getting more research and doing the work.
Councilman Brady?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few questions. I want to start off, though, with a couple of points on the state shared revenue. Do we have any information on how heavily we're going to suffer when it comes to highway user revenue? I know during the Ehrlich administration and during the O'Malley administration, when they needed to balance the budget, they nearly zeroed those numbers out, and there's a significant amount that was coming to us. Can we expect the same this time around? Any crystal ball advocates here?
Well, one thing about the state highway, they issue a letter to us 2 times a year revising what their original estimates are. So from what I'm seeing right now, we're probably will be flat in 24, so that'll be right at probably the 2.5 million or less. So the dynamics of that is that depending on how they split the pie and what portion of that we get, the trend is showing that it's going to be lower. And they tell us what that amount is. We have no control over that.
Agreed.
And so it's trending down right now.
Okay. And like I said, 2 previous times it was a significant hit we took. With regard to the income tax, it's described as a state shared revenue, but that is a fixed percentage based upon what an individual's income is. Is that not correct? So
Yes, but it's kind of a rolling number because it's not all one particular tax year that's involved with that.
And the reason I comment on that was during a legislative committee meeting 10 years ago or so, both leaders of the House of Delegates and the Senate were our guests, and they both were lamenting how state-shared revenues shouldn't be shared, it should be the states, and they were talking about highway user, and they were talking about the income tax, and thank God they didn't zero them out. To me, the whole time I've been on the council previously now, much of what the city does is core services. So I think in ensuring that we don't sacrifice the quantity and the quality of this core services, I think we need to seriously look at the possibility of adjusting our tax rate in order to ensure that the core services remain as our citizens expect. I support the comments that were made earlier about economic development, and I think it's very important that we become a little more proactive in that. So that I'd be supporting any discussion that we have in the coming months on how we might be able to do that. I appreciate your optimism about the fund balance and everything, but on page 13 of the budget document, it's kind of a frightening display of information there. And I was on the council when we established the 25%, and the rationale was to basically say, I think the comment was made about the recommendation is 5 months of revenue in order to pay for 5 months of services, and that's a valid one. But I also have to caution my colleagues that there's nothing in there that really says we don't go below 25%. It's a goal. And if you have a justification and it's a short-term dip below the 25%, I don't see that as a problem. My concern, though, is, and whenever I've looked at 22, this will be the 23rd budget coming up, since we instituted this, if that crossover was in the out years, say 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, because of the way you overestimate cost and you underestimate revenues, that's never was any item for me to be of concern. I put my analytical hat on and saw, well, that's 5, 7 years. Things change in that amount of time, and it's not going to be a problem. But in the current one, it looks like it's a year to year and a half, and that has grave concerns. So that, I think we need to be very careful with this coming budget to ensure we don't end up going below it, because then we do have some challenges there. And then kind of dovetailing off of a comment that Councilman Rogers made about efficiencies and incentives and what have you. I know in the federal government there were times, they come and they go, but there were times when they set up incentives where an employee makes a recommendation that results in a cost savings to the city. Do this differently from what we've traditionally done it, do it this way, and we save 10%, well, they get a recognition and an award of a percentage of what the savings is. Not all of the savings, but, those kind of creative problems, because the people that are going to come up with creative ways to do things are the ones that actually are on the line doing those things. So I'd encourage looking at something like that and you're going to tell me you already do something like that.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Employees receive bonuses for those particular incentive awards, as we call them, for doing something over and above their normal workload, or a recommendation to department head that increased the efficiency in a particular department. The policy is on that the department director will write that up. He will send it off to the city manager and the HR director. They will make a determination whether or not that needs to be done and approve the incentive award or not. So we have it in place, and it's used quite often. We encourage our employees to provide us that information.
Right.
I remember when I first started here, we used to have a box in the employee lounge where employees could just put in suggestions. We don't have that anymore. People are more direct. They are going to their supervisors, and they basically say, hey, what about this ideal?
Okay.
And can we do it this way? So we do have those good things in place, and I wanted to say to Councilman Tisdale that the city has a real robust employee plan, especially with the educational reimbursement that council has provided to them. We also have longevity pay that council has provided to them. So we have things in place to have people stay here. But most of all, they like working for the city of Bowie. So most of our employees wind up being very long-term employees. We just have a new dynamic coming in with the younger generation that see things a little different in life. And it's okay for them to, go from one job to another. I have young sons that have had 4 or 5 jobs, and they're less than 40 and 30 years of age. So I think that's the phenomenon that's happening there. But we normally have long-term employees here at the city of Bowie. I'm an example of that.
And so I'll close by, again, commending staff on this presentation, the information you pulled together, and rely on your guidance and insight to move forward on this. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
I think we were going back now to Council Member Ndubamadu.
Thank you so much. My wonderful colleagues jogged a couple of thoughts, so I have a question. This is more my unawareness. Police officers, are they, for City of Bowie police officers, when we hire, are they able to transfer their retirement plan if they're coming from another jurisdiction?
Well, it depends on what system they're in.
Okay.
All right, we have LEOPS, but there are other retirement systems. Baltimore has their own, Prince George's County has their own. So one of the things you have to do is work out the interchangeability of it, and it depends on the system, where they're coming from. But if they're vested in it, if they come from Baltimore and they were already vested in Baltimore's, then that's always there for them as far as the defined benefit. Now, you can always roll over 401ks and 457s. That's no problem there.
Is it on the county or the jurisdiction in which they're coming from, if they're not vested, to allow them to be able to possibly transfer anything that's not vested?
There are some regulatory requirements, for example, coming from Baltimore or coming from the county, that could determine whether it's interchangeable or not, or whether it fits with LEOPS, which is ours. That's what we offer, and that's out of our control with state laws and that sort of thing.
Okay.
But I think from my experience, there's a general interchangeability, but there are some limits to it. So you want to get them when they're young, all right, before, rather than somebody. But if you get somebody who's got 10 years in, they're always vested in that, so they can always go back to it when they hit a certain age, right?
Awesome, thank you for that. Mr. Matthews, you talked about the potential decline in income taxes. Does that mean, or can one extrapolate from that statement, that there will be an incline in particular business taxes or corporate taxes?
The city doesn't receive that type of revenue. That type of revenue goes to the state and to the county. Our main sources of revenue are real and personal property taxes.
Right.
All the other economic drivers that you would think a business would pay to a city, that doesn't happen here. Sales tax goes to the state.
Right, so I think my question, let me just clarify. For example, you talked about like Melford, for example, and the revenue that would come from areas like that. So do you see a potential increase coming in that area, or is there anything, I guess what I'm looking for, is there anything that this council, during this budget cycle, can you give us guidance? Is there anything that we could be doing differently or looking at for more of an increase in that area, more comparable to like the Melfords of the world?
Well, development is always a good source of revenue, and that's what's happening over at Melford now. And I mean, they're building buildings all the time, apartment buildings, the hotels that are coming in play. So we get hotel and motel revenue from that. I think the footprint that's over there at Melford has already been predetermined. So we'll watch the revenue increase as development increases.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question around county. So I know part of this you might have access to, you might not. I'm looking to understand during this budget cycle if we have a breakdown in terms of what is, so for example, when development happens in Bowie specifically, there are two pots of there's two pots of allocation that happens, one to education, another to public safety. Is there a way that do you have the breakdown for the public safety allocation and how much comes back to the city and our public safety department? Is that something that like we have access to that the county has provided for us?
We haven't had to basically request that yet. We'll be requesting that for South Lake as it gets built out, but it's normally once the streets are totally built out, the residential areas are built out, then we can apply for only the public safety portion of that. The school portion goes to the county.
So we weren't able to see it from Melford, or will we? Yeah, because Melford is relatively developed.
Yes, as they develop the residential, because that tax that you're talking about is basically residential and apartment dwelling that we will get a benefit from.
Okay. It would be helpful if we could see the breakdown of how much we're going to get from a public safety perspective from Melford or some of the more developed ones. When you're able to apply for that and able to share, that would be helpful. And I know that the education component goes to the county, but from a transparency perspective, if you are able to request that, it would be helpful to see how much money they are getting from an education tax from Bowie residents, because that will help us understand what's not being prioritized, what we need to advocate for as a council in terms of improvements for certain schools and things like that. So it would just be helpful to understand the flow of money that is coming from Bowie that is going to the county so that we can do a better job delineating what is actually coming back in terms of investment. And I know that's not technically our jurisdiction, but the visibility would be helpful.
Realizing that that's kind of a one-time action. It's not ongoing revenue. Okay.
Right. That would be helpful. Okay, awesome. Thank you. And then the other thing that I wanted to just highlight for my colleagues, I know a number of people have commented on tax. This is a comment that I want to amplify on behalf of District 4. We talked about inflation this evening. I really think that we need to be mindful of what people are experiencing when we think about raising taxes. And I want to amplify what Councilmember Rogers talked about with operational efficiency and just really getting an understanding there and really just taking a deeper look at things. I know you're already going to do that, but just amplifying that message. Inflation is very, very difficult right now. People are experiencing very difficult economic times. When you look at I have the 2023, 2024 tax rates right in front of me up on my computer screen for the state of Maryland. And when you look at Prince George's County, people are already paying exorbitant rates when you talk about education because of the school system. You talk about the imbalance with economic development and the reliance on property taxes. I really want to amplify that on behalf of District 4, that when this body is thinking about raising taxes or voting to raise taxes, just really think about all of the other things that people are having to spend on in Prince George's County and the current times that our constituency finds themselves in. I know that might be different for your districts, but for my district and District 4, that is not something that I can advocate for at this time, especially without having a deeper dive into economic development and then also operational efficiency. And I do genuinely and wholeheartedly believe that that is not a sustainable business model to continuously look at increasing taxes as a method of paying for other sources. We have to figure out other revenue generating sources and really take a deeper look at that and have a sustainable strategy going forward, and not just saying every couple of years that we're going to raise taxes. That is not fair to our constituency, and it's just not a sustainable business model. So thank you so much. Those are the rest of my comments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other comments from any other council members? If not, thank you so very much, staff.
Well, thank you, Mr.
City
Mayor.
Manager, we appreciate it.
I took copious notes, and you'll be getting my budget in April. Thank you, sir.
Thank you again. All right, at this time, we will move on to new business item B, the discussion of the size of the Public Safety Committee. And Councilmember Steve, if you would like to take the lead as you requested that on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very briefly, we interviewed 2 candidates for a Public Safety Committee position. From conversations, it sounds like both applicants were young, highly qualified. One had a strong background in fire and EMS. The other had a background in IT cybersecurity with the U.S. Senate. In follow-up conversations with the Public Safety Committee and their chair, they basically said, we'd love to have both applicants. Essentially, we're just limited to the number of committee members to 9 right now. I said, what if we just temporarily increase your committee size to 10 so we can appoint them both? They said, that sounds great. Their only caveat was that it just be a temporary increase in the event of retirement, a resignation, or a death. They asked that the number go back to 9. But this was just a simple matter of bringing this to us to see if we wanted to temporarily increase the committee number for the Public Safety Committee to 10 to get that fire and EMS experience as well as that cybersecurity experience in there as well as the committee has asked for. I'm happy to entertain any questions my colleagues have about that.
Well, if I may, I will tell you that my concern was changing historically the size of any of the committees or anything because of any temporary suggestions or individuals. In this particular case, we were looking at 2 people with very good backgrounds. I agree with you. One with the fire EMS, the other with cybersecurity. At that time, when we talked about it, we only had 1 opening on the Public Safety Committee, but we had several openings on the IT Committee. So the recommendation was that the individual with the cybersecurity be a part of the IT community, and we take the other person on the public safety. Now, one of the things I would like to make sure that we all understand as a city and all, that our committees should not be working in a silo. That our IT committee, along with every other committee, should be working together and having information going through the liaisons here, but also through the city itself, so that if there are issues from a public safety standpoint, that we can address those issues through our IT community, through our community services, and through all of the different ones. And so my thing is just not, we have positions there. We've on several occasions asked people to apply again later, because we filled the vacancy that was there and just had them just wait to apply again or look at another committee. And I think that works well for the city, and I would rather us do that than to start one-upping or deciding which committees should be expanded at this point or that. And I think the committees were established with the size that we thought was manageable and good. And I simply just think we should just stick with that for the time being. And I opened it up to other questions, discussions. Anyone? Councilman Truesdale?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree. I think it sets, it doesn't set the best precedents to other committees. There are some committees that, really don't have the support, or they feel that, the council is hearing their agendas and, or perhaps maybe absent. I guess my question is, who is the liaison for the particular committee?
We currently don't have one.
Okay. That may be more of an answer than the latter. Okay. Yeah.
doing that. I was waiting until after the election.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all I have.
Your hand up, and then we'll come to you, Councilwoman.
I appreciate and I can understand the desire. And actually, I want to thank the city clerk for providing us copies. This is the resolutions that establish and then modify the charge of the Public Safety Committee. And it's very explicit. It says shall consist of 9 members, and I suggested 9, like 7, like 11. Very important, so you don't have the possibility of tied votes. So just going from 9 to 10 potentially creates a problem, but I'm not saying that maybe we should expand. My one main comment with regards to this is, and I never thought of it before this while I was on previously, but I would think that there are a few committees, the Recreation Committee is another one that comes to mind, where it ought to be explicit. There should be a member that represents the fire department, a member that represents the police interest, a member that represents the EMS, so you have a broad sweep of talent that can look at public safety and cover all the areas, because no one person is going to be able to cover all those. So if we do modify it and do change it in the future, I think we should do it with the input and discussion with the committee and the chair. If we add a position, I think we ought to add 2, but I think we also ought to delineate the areas of expertise that we'd like to have on the committee. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilwoman Ndubamadu.
I just wanted to say that on behalf of the IT committee, we would love to have more members. So if that person was open to joining, I think that could be a really valuable skill set. And I think with the IT committee, we are looking at public safety solutions through technology. So with a cybersecurity background, that could be very helpful and a new perspective that we add to our committee should they be willing to join. So we would love to have them if that's an option. Thank you.
Councilwoman Rogers.
Certainly, thank you. So I have a certain feeling about public safety, particularly as I sit here and I look on next door, and there was another carjacking in the end section of a DoorDash delivery driver. As you know, it was mentioned earlier that the resident was shot and killed in Fort Washington, but it was a resident here in Bowie. If the times were different, I would definitely say, this is what the rule says. I'm a bureaucrat by heart, if the times were different. But because the times are not, because crime is on the rise, particularly violent crime with the use of weapons and guns, to me, this was something that I really thought about, and I felt like there is a need. Now a need for the cyber as well as the other person on this committee. But I will say this much. I do believe that each committee should have a liaison. I do believe that maybe the committees, we as a council, if this is appropriate, should look at the committees and its structure, because Councilman Brady is correct. It was designed so that you could have a tiebreaker. But in these times of so much violence, I think we really need to consider a temporary thing. And I agree that cyber person probably could do a great job over in the IT committee as well. But during the Christmas holidays, I had 2 cards that were, fraudulently used while I'm sitting at my home on Christmas Day. The world is different. So if it's a temporary thing, and I know the concern is setting precedent, I truly, sincerely understand that. But I also understand that people come to Bowie to commit crime, and then they go back to where they're from. And if this is a temporary fix, and if it's a matter of committees working together and getting that skill set across committee lines, then I'm for that, 100%. But I do want people to know that I have a specific concern about the crime and the importance of the Public Safety Committee at this point in time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick comment. First of all, I'll take the opportunity to thank all the people who serve on committees, and I'm loath to turn down anybody. Given the economic advantages that we have and the salary we pay them, it's a pretty good return on investment. So my general feeling is I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, and if we have somebody that's interested in the position, unfortunately, they came at the same time, and at the same time, we also have a kind of, as you mentioned, Councilwoman Rogers, that we have an increased need at the moment, some peaks in various crimes. I don't have any problem with that, and I think if we have volunteers and in this circumstance, kind of a one-off, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. To Councilman Brady's commentary about designating areas of responsibility, I think that that's a good idea too, and it's probably something that the committee's chair ought to see that something is assigned or worked out, particularly since they already have members that are filling certain responsibilities, so that there can be a certain focus for certain players on the team, if you will. So I think that's probably a good direction to provide to all of our committees and the chairs for those committees. So thank you.
Hearing those comments, and I'll go back to one of the things when we first faced this issue is, number one, I did think that the person would better be served on a committee where we had openings to make sure that we could do that, and we crossed lines. The other thing I talked about also was that we not look at changing what we have, but if anything, that we could just add an alternate. That you just said, okay, we would have an alternate position on that committee where we weren't changing the structure of the committee. They were just someone that was there that, because we need to understand that people, though they may not have a vote, are all welcome to participate within the committees. I mean, that everybody can be a part of that, and they can lend their expertise to that. So when they have the meetings and all, they're there. So that's my thought. Again, I'm one about setting precedent. And as we start looking at committees and saying, well, I really like this person, and so therefore the next time up, is it really going to be for us to say, well, DeFore really likes this guy, and we need to change that committee because he wants them on there to change the number there. And doing that, I think we should stick with the precedent we currently have. I think we should encourage everyone who wants to participate to participate. I believe that any expertise, and I think we all, as I stated early on, even when we talked about the budget, my number one concern was with public safety. That goes without saying. So I would just rather we continue the process we have, that we look at encouraging people if they'd like to participate within committees, we do that, but that we don't try to react at the moment for individuals and just simply go by what we as a council approve for individuals for different committees and just move forward with that. I think we're looking for a problem for a solution. I don't think it's a problem to have an individual work on another committee or to just participate, as opposed to having to start one-offing where we think somebody would address a particular issue or putting more people just to react to the moment. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that. But that's for us to decide as a council, and kind of, we don't have to vote on anything, but we can just as a general principle of how people feel, and I'd like to see as we move forward. thoughts? Okay,
You go ahead.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I do like the idea of an alternate, but I also understand that all things are not equal across all the committees. So I do want to make that statement. I'd like that idea.
Councilman Steph?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a volunteer committee where people come together, talk about issues, and occasionally make recommendations to us. There's no budget implications here. This is coming from the committee. In my mind, this is a fairly straightforward thing. The committee's got two people they like. They wanted to make them both be included. They both have areas of expertise the committee feels they would like more of. And that's all we're talking about. Whether we want to include a member as an alternate or just appoint one person and tell the other they can show up to the meetings, and that's fine if that's what people would rather do. But as Councilman Brady points out, maybe it would be worthwhile for us to take the time to actually meet with all of our committees one-on-one over the course of the next few months and, actually take that opportunity to talk about, what we expect and want from the committees. Because I think as Councilmember Ndibumadu was suggesting, I think some of the committees sometimes express that they're looking for that guidance from us to understand what we actually want from them and expect from them. And maybe in the course of those conversations, we can uncover whether there's, as Councilmember Ndibumadu suggested, maybe a committee that wants a larger membership or a smaller membership or, a change in how they operate. So that might be something worth doing, taking the opportunity the next few months to actually bring in those committees. We can spread them out over time over our council meetings and hear from them and maybe talk a little bit about potentially making some adjustments based on their suggestions. Just a thought.
Yeah. I think that's quite reasonable, yeah. And what we'll do is we'll just give an opportunity for the committees to come in, talk to us. We can give them feedback on what our expectations are and get some more feedback from them, and then we can look at if we need to make any adjustments to the committees at that time.
Let's do it during the budget hearings.
Hey, thank you all very much. At this time, I'll entertain a motion. Mayor Pro Tem? I'm sorry, I should have gave you an extra
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. My apologies, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn to closed session under the statutory authority of the Maryland Annotated Code, General Provisions, Article 3-305B3, to consider the acquisition of real property for a public purpose and matters directly related thereto.
Second.
It's been moved and probably second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please respond with an aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same favor. Hearing none, motion carries. And I'd like to thank everyone for coming out this evening and wish everyone a very happy, prosperous, and healthy new year. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. There you go. Councilwoman. Oh, she's tough. Councilwoman, did I pass you one?